Radical Secular, a video series dedicated to the separation of church and state and the pursuit of justice.
Hello and welcome back to The Radical Secular. I'm Christophe Defoe.
I'm Sean Prophet.
We're joined today by my dear friend Stephanie Roth-Goldberg for a conversation about body image, diet culture, eating disorders, and how those issues intersect with social justice. Stephanie will also join us for a news segment during which we'll discuss a recent article about the lasting psychological impact of the Trump era. But before we get into any of that, I want to remind you to subscribe to this podcast wherever you get your podcasts, give us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts and write us a review, and tell your friends and family about our show. Word of mouth matters.
Email us at theradicalsecular@gmail.com. Follow us on Instagram at @radical_secular. Follow us on Twitter at Radical Secular. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel, podcasts at Apple, Google, Spotify, and Stitcher.
Okay, let's move on now to our guest segment. We are pleased to welcome to the show Stephanie Roth-Goldberg. Stephanie Roth-Goldberg is an interactive psychodynamic psychotherapist and founder of the Intuitive Psychotherapy Center in New York City. Her clinical areas of expertise include treating eating disorders and disordered eating from a health at every size paradigm. Stephanie is a certified intuitive eating counselor and believes in the intuitive eating anti-diet model. Stephanie is also an accomplished triathlete, and her special interests include working with athletes suffering from body and eating disturbances, as well as performance anxiety. Stephanie is also a mother to her 2 children, a partner to her husband, and one of my closest friends of all time, and an all-around cool-ass woman. Without further ado, The Radical Secular presents Stephanie Roth-Goldberg. Stephanie, you're one of my closest friends of all time. We've been through thick and thin together. I can't tell you how happy I am to have you here on the show. And by the way, I'm really happy that we go by our full names now, Stephanie and Christophe versus Steph and Chris. I think it's a step forward in our lives, in our relationship. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm really psyched to be here. And I'm also glad we use our full names now.
And look, so what's up with your shirt?
So my shirt says, oh, my hair's really long. It says, I don't give a fuck about your diet, Susan.
That's great.
This shirt came out or was printed about a year before Karen became the name. So now it's made with Karen, but I have the, I suppose, original version.
That's perfect.
Which is funny because my mother's name is Susan and she talks a lot about her diet.
That's so funny.
Watchers.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. That's so fucking funny that it's Susan because I was like, your mom's name is Susan and she's really into diets.
Yeah. Yeah. I like to wear this around the house when she's home. So.
Oh, that's perfect.
Yeah.
Okay. So how about Sean? How about your t-shirt today, man?
Well, mine is a Yoda shirt, and it has 3 words of wisdom, and you can see you could tear off these little tags on the bottom.
Nice.
Oh, that's awesome.
Nice.
And the one that's most relevant to this show is size matters not.
Indeed. Perfect. I'm not wearing a diet related shirt. I'm wearing a Pod Save America shirt. And I'm wearing the Pod Save America shirt for a specific reason. And that is because Stephanie and I and her husband, Stephanie's husband, and a now husband, and my wife and some friends, we went up to ski up in Vermont, and it was in 2017, February, right after the election. And it was like, I was in a really bad place. It was raw. It was new. It felt like we were about to be living under fascism. And by the way, on the way up there, I was harassed by a police officer. And that's a whole other story. It was intense. Like, it was intense. Lindsay was crying, had the camera out, thought that this was one of those times. It was insane. And then Stephanie, we were on the chairlift, and she introduced me to Pod Save America. And it was this light of like hope, a beacon of hope, like a fighting, like a call to fight back in a way that was so important to me at that moment. I still listen to that show weekly. I don't listen to it as much as I used to, but at least once a week I listen to it. Still an outstanding show and such a big help for me in those times. So, Stephanie, as always, thank you for that.
Oh, yeah. I'm so glad.
Yeah. And so again, thanks for being here on the show, Steph, Ani. And let's get into our like really targeted and human-centric news topic for today. You're going to join us for the news topic, and it's sort of on brand for today's show, which is the psychology and the psychological impact of the Trump era. So let me just read my little script here. Most weekdays, I listen to a podcast morning show called What a Day from Crooked Media. That's also the same organization that does the Positive America, incidentally. The other day, they did an unusual segment in which they played short clips of several women expressing their struggles with pandemic-induced unemployment and related mental health issues. They chose women because, statistically speaking, women are faring worse in the COVID recession than men, with Black women, as always, bearing the fucking brunt. What else is new? Those women's expressions of frustration and anger and fear stand in stark contrast to the relatively detached feeling COVID relief negotiations that are ongoing in Washington. Of course, America's suffering under Trump and the GOP didn't begin with COVID-19. The pandemic is just the most recent and the most widespread manifestation of that suffering. So Vox released a really excellent article last week that goes into considerable detail about the psychological toll the Trump era has taken on Americans in general and members of marginalized groups in particular. I'd like for us to react to some of those excerpts now from that article. Okay. And so getting into the excerpt now, I'll read the excerpt, a lot of reading here on the front end, but we'll get into the conversation. Okay. The problems Trump brought to light, racism, xenophobia, and transphobia, to name just a few, certainly didn't start with him. But from the moment he announced his campaign in a speech maligning Mexican people as rapists, he made such attitudes more explicit than ever before within the bounds of traditional party politics. His rhetoric helped embolden a wave of hate crimes across the country, targeting Muslim Americans, immigrants, and a number of other groups he had demonized. In case anyone forgot that that's what happened.
How could we?
How could we? Meanwhile, all his constant all caps tweeting, his preference for staff who enabled rather than checked his worst impulses, and his return to campaign-style rallies shortly after his election all led to a relentless news environment that subjected Americans to the president's disjointed and frequently abusive thoughts multiple times a day. In the first years of Trump's presidency, Trump tweeted more than 11,000 times. 5,889 of those tweets, according to the New York Times, attacked someone or something. While Trump was able to energize a core of his supporters with a mix of bravado, defiance, and racism, for many others, his presidency was quite simply scary. In the American Psychological Association's 2016 Stress in America survey, 63% of Americans said the future of the country was a significant source of stress. 56% said they were stressed out by the current political climate. And in 2018 version of that same survey, those numbers went to up to 69% and 62% respectively. So that's a lot that I just read there, and a lot of it we know, but it's important, I think, to sort of rehash and just to think about what we just lived through, because it's going to be really relevant to the rest of our conversation. So I'd like for all of us to sort of react to that terrible report. And maybe we'll start with you, Stephanie, since you're the guest. Do you have any comments on that?
Sure. Yeah, I have so many. And it's interesting you used past tense, what we all lived through. I have to say I could not disagree with that more. We are still living this. All of those policies are in place. I think the Supreme Court is one of the worst things that have happened, and that's not going away. So I think we are living in this present tense for sure.
Great point.
As a therapist, I'm very much still living in it. And as a mother in this pandemic, so, yeah, I mean, people are in this article. One of the quotes that stood out to me is, and I'm not quoting this directly, but something about how you're constantly in a state of hypervigilance. And I think we could say that maybe that's somewhat past tense. That feels as though it's eased, but it takes a while to recover from any sort of active whether it's body or mind, trauma state. And so I think, even if we're not constantly in that state, I feel the news cycle is a little more reasonable at the moment, but you're still sort of living in that feeling state. And the pandemic, is still raging, and it feels unsure what's going to happen in the government. I think Biden's making some moves, but I also, I think the majority isn't enough to get as much done as we would like. And so I think we're still very much living in this.
That's such a great point, right? Because and I'm thinking about it in terms of trauma, right? It's not that like that acute trauma disappears and then suddenly everything's fine, right?
Right.
It's not like that, right? Our minds, right? And by the way, I don't think it took me personally a long time to come to terms with the fact that Trump was president in the first place, right? That didn't just turn on one day and suddenly I was like, okay, it was a shock. It was almost like this sort of slow coming to terms with it and sort of coming off of that sort of high cortisol, like flight or fight, like 4 years of that shit, right? It's like 4 years of this, of like, because look, I mean, I'll bring this like really personal for me is that it felt to me like every time I saw a MAGA hat or a MAGA flag, it felt like it feels like when I hear something racist. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Which is a physical,
absolutely. Yeah.
It's a physical feeling that happens to me every time I hear something racist, even if it's not pointed at me. Right. It's like even it just in the abstract, just the knowledge that people like that exist and that they just don't think my life is as worth as much as theirs is like that is emotionally taxing. So my point is that like that doesn't just go away one day.
One of the things I would say is, I'm sorry, you were going to say something?
No, go ahead. Oh,
well, one of the things I sense whenever I see a MAGA hat or a Trump flag or Trump 2020 sticker or whatever, these are people who are devoted to ethnic cleansing. They're devoted to turning the United States into if not a completely white Christian nation, certainly a nation where everyone else is a distant third or fourth or fifth class citizen, right? And this is also not like a situation where when Trump is out, where it would be like coming back from a war where the trauma's over and you can start your life and you're dealing with PTSD. Right. It's like there's waves of continuing trauma and PTSD from previous trauma that are cycling. And so I think that, and what made it particularly worse was the constant election fraud narrative whereby, from November 7th or whenever it was finally called and everybody was celebrating in the streets. And then it was like, oh, wait, not so fast. He's not done. He might come back. And even all the way up until 2 days before the inauguration, when Mike Lindell went into the White House with a paper on there talking about calling up, declaring martial law. It's like there was no way to sleep. Trump ruined Thanksgiving with his rant, a 45-minute rant on Thanksgiving about the stolen election. I mean, we were trying to and every time we tried to move on, and they're still doing it. Like there's another date, March 4th is now a date where a lot of the insurrectionists are talking about some big new thing going down. It's like, I think they're completely full of shit, but who knows what they're planning or what's going to happen.
It's interesting and also the reason we couldn't just accept the inauguration is we were all waiting for Georgia, which was a big deal. So it's like, oh, great, Biden won, but what's happening in the Senate? But Christophe, you make a really good point because there's a house that I drive by twice a week when we go pick up the woman who does our childcare, and they have Trump flags, and it's as if they decorated for Christmas with Trump lights. I always say every single week, I'm somehow still surprised that it looks like I don't know, that's probably where everyone in the community goes and plans whatever it is they plan. And it seems terrifying. But I'm still shocked. And I don't know why it's still shocking, right? But that idea that it's not over and you still are in this state of hypervigilance, and I get sort of scared almost driving by, even though I'm in a car and the house is obviously set back. They have no idea who I am, whatever. But it's just that idea. I'm always thinking, what's going on in that house? Those people must be evil. What are they planning? What are they going to do? And so I think we're still very much in that state, even though Trump himself is gone.
Right. That's a really good point. Also relatedly, and this is why the Confederate monument issue is so important, right? Because what these things are symbols of white supremacy. The MAGA hat and the MAGA flag, they're not just flags. It's not like a fucking New York Giants flag, right? No, it's not just your team. No. This is a statement you're making. This goes to your point, Sean, right? This is a statement you're making that I believe in white supremacy. That is what the statement you're making. And by the way, Christian supremacy, right? Let's talk about Jewish space lasers, right? And because when it comes down to racism, right, it doesn't take long before there's a Jewish cabal running the world, right? That's always what it comes down to, with the Proud Boys, with Boebert, with Marjorie Taylor Greene. It always comes down to basically Black people are being manipulated black people and liberals are being manipulated by a Jewish conspiracy. That is the bottom line of every single one. That's what's behind every one of those fucking flags.
This is what it is. I mean, 100 years ago, almost to the day, this conspiracy got its start in Germany because the Jews were being blamed for the Germans losing World War I, and all of the war reparations were supposedly going to Jewish bankers and people who were trying to oppress, right? So that was a major, major point in the start of Nazism.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and anti-Semitism obviously is at the bottom of the entire the blood libel idea behind the whole QAnon thing, right?
Which goes back almost 1,000 years.
That goes back 1,000 years. It's the same shit.
But by the way, Trump is so good at what he does that so many Jews voted for him and would stand by that to this day, that he's for Israel, and somehow that's the dividing line. And actually nothing makes me more furious than that. But yeah, I mean,
Zionism and Nazism are really branches of the same tree. It's almost like, the Jews were victims of the Holocaust, and then they went and started it almost repeated the cycle with the Palestinians.
Yeah, so that's a very complicated question. So so just circle back quickly, Stephanie, and that is, are you obviously you can't divulge details and we wouldn't ask you to, but to what extent have you seen in your practice, right? This sort of dealing with the fallout of the Trump era?
Yeah, it's so interesting. I'm going to say it in a somewhat backwards way. And I think the most notable thing is when someone isn't talking about politics or the nature of what's going on in our country. And I'm part of a psychoanalytic institute, and I'm part of, this peer supervision group. And we always talk about what's going on with the people who aren't talking about this, actually, because the majority of people are. And a lot of what comes up in therapy, or at least with my particular clients, is this fighting and the disagreements among family members that, they're so split. Oh, my parents voted for Trump. How do I handle this? Or my in-laws voted for Trump, something like that. And that stress. So it's not just, and I think that's part of this too. It's not just we watch the news and that's terrifying. It's then how do you handle dinners? How do you handle, whatever your husband's husband or husband's wife, and or your brother's husband or whatever. And so it's everywhere you look. It I think causes chaos. I also work with a few clients who identify as LGBTQ, and I think for that population, this has been devastating and terrifying. And, of course it comes up because they're getting stripped of their rights, or they were. And again, the Supreme Court is equally terrifying. And I also work with a lot of survivors of sexual abuse, and this brings up a whole lot of trauma for them. So, it's like I said, it's only notable when it isn't affecting someone's life. That's the most notable thing, I think.
That's
if
really,
that makes sense.
That makes a ton of sense, and that's really, really insightful. And because what it triggers in my mind is this idea, this feeling, this sense, and is that. Let me come at this in a backward way, and that is the silence from Twitter is deafening, right? All of a sudden, and the reason why I bring that up is because it's astonishing to suddenly realize how much noise Trumpism was in our lives. Like it was all encompassing. This gets to your point, Stephanie, is that it was all encompassing. You could never escape it. It was the news was relentless, and it was always bad news. It was always for 4 years, loud bad news yelled in your ear for 4 fucking years. It reminds me of being one of those guys at like the in Guantanamo Bay, like in one of those cells, just having like noise blasted at you for 24 hours a day, and like there is no escape from it. And as from an LGBTQ perspective or trans people, I just can't even imagine what that feels like. I remember how it felt for me right after the election, and I wrote an article about this. I'll put it in the show notes, really detailing the sort of experience I had coming to terms with this. But it was like getting punched in the stomach. It was like, holy shit. It undermined what I thought America was, like my thought. And that was very destabilizing in a way that I didn't expect it to be, right? It wasn't just like I lost an election. We lost an election to Bush too. That sucked, right? But it didn't completely destabilize my sort of concept of what America is and my identity with respect to America, right? Especially having grown up in an all-white environment. Like all of a sudden it was like these white people that I grew up with, that I loved, that were my friends, they voted for this shithead. They voted for what? That's like an identity attacking like experience. If you see what I mean?
I remember being at a bar with you near Union Square shortly after the election, and you were talking about how even in Manhattan, it felt different to be a Black man sitting on the sidewalk drinking a beer. And I think the other thing that we're sort of talking about is everyone's personal agency felt as though it was attacked, whether you're a person of color or a woman. It's sort of, it doesn't feel safe to exist in that way.
Exactly.
And so I remember talking to you about that in the middle of one of the most liberal cities in the whole world.
Yeah. On the street of Jersey City, right? Some guy called me the N-word, right? This is like right after the election. And the racists were emboldened. He was this wasted white dude, like, looking kind of like a finance guy. And he followed me around. Like me and my friend Jeff were at a bar and we're watching a Rangers game. And watching it together, it's funny that we were at a bar inside, just blows my mind at this point in my life. Like, Jesus Christ, we were inside at a bar, like in a crowded bar, like that's like flight or fight mode now. I'm like, oh my God, that's fucking dangerous, But this guy came up to my table and he's like, "Where do you live, man?" Wasted. And I've done this for a long time. I know when a white wasted guy is coming up to me and looking to poke and try to get a reaction from me. It's like I know it, I can feel it, and I knew what was going on here. Even Jeff picked up on it, and we went later on, like hours later, the game's over. I'm walking down the street and here he comes. Here comes Mr. And he starts getting up in my face and telling me that, like, why do I live in Jersey City? Do I live in Jersey? How long have I lived in Jersey City? Asking me these questions that are like, and I just pushed him away. And then he called me the N-word, and this was in Jersey City. This was not in rural, middle of no fucking bumblefuck place. This was in Jersey City, New Jersey, ultra liberal. And like I said, like, this sense of feeling unsafe, I can only imagine being a trans person, especially male to female trans, Black male to female trans. That is like basically like your life expectancy is short.
The shortest
life expectancy, statistically speaking, because I can only imagine being in that space over the last 4 years. I can only imagine what that must have been like, And like you said, it's not over. It's not over. Let's be clear. It's not over.
I wanted to share something just about my experience as a white man, because theoretically, right? Please. I mean, Trump should have been like, he was on my side, right? I mean, he's like supports the white man. He's like, but for me, I experienced a different kind of a fear, and that was that I always really wanted to stand up for equality, for cosmopolitanism, for globalism, for progress.
And you have been for a long, long, long time doing those things.
Yeah, and I'm Mr. Star Trek. I want everybody to get along. I want us all to be to be equal, right? And so suddenly, I had to be a little bit more afraid to express those points of view because do you know who white supremacists hate even worse than black people?
Oh, I know.
They hate white people who defend black people, right?
Yes.
Because we're
an N-word lover.
We are an N-word lover, and we make them into hypocrites. We isolate them. We are the biggest threat to them because we have all of their privilege, but we don't agree, and we're going to fight them, right? Like I would put my life on the line to fight them, and but that started to feel actually real, like that. And then there were people who were friends and family who'd formerly been liberals turned toward Trumpism. And so that caused a schism, very personal schism in my life. And so there was a lot of trauma related to that and a lot of really long conversations that shouldn't have needed to even have been had with people who were beginning to sympathize with Trumpism. And that was fucking traumatic, man. I got to tell you. And I'm still not, those relationships have not been repaired.
Yeah. Yeah. It's tough. I mean, in terms of those relationships, man, and like this is what you were saying, Stephanie and Sean, you're saying the same thing. Is that has been the toughest thing. I mean, like with the relationships that even me trying to come to terms with people who are my friends, but who are not anti-racists, right? Because then now I make that demand of my friends, right? Like, I'm not interested in being friends with you if you're not going to do this, because that might have been on the back burner in the past, but since Trumpism, it got pushed right to the front burner, right? And forget it. And then you have these even harder relationships with family members, right? It's like, Jesus, how do you navigate that, right? So it's tough. It's really, really tough. And to your point, Sean, I feel similarly in terms of feminism, right? And I know you do too. If you stand up for women, you can be sure that you are going to be called names, right? You're going to be right. And this is not to put myself and be like, oh my God, I'm the victim here. But nevertheless, the point is that like, it takes courage to be an ally. A real ally, right? A real ally. And that means confronting people when they say bigoted stuff, right? I can be in a locker room. And this is the example I use a lot, a locker room playing hockey, right? And it's just like, it's anti-gay slurs and misogyny flying around, right? At open hockey or whatever. And being willing to say at that point, like in the moment, in real time, nah, man, that's not fucking cool. Because and most people, frankly, are not as confrontational as they think they are, and they usually just shut up. But there might be one guy, there might be one who's going to give you a hard time. And so I'm just sort of, I think, just reiterating your point a little bit there, Sean. But I think it's an important one. I think it's an important one. So that was, I think, a good and fruitful conversation. It's really important, I think, for us to reflect on that. And I think, especially Stephanie, your point is that it's okay, everybody out there, to still feel like we are winding down, or that there's still a lot of things to be worried about. Especially my fear, like you said, is in the courts more than anything else. They are completely, unaccountable to us. There's nothing we can do about it, right? Nothing we can do is that we can make legislation or amend the Constitution, which we know is absolutely off the table. So here we are. We could barely even pass COVID relief, let alone fucking change the Constitution. That's not on the table. Right. That's not on the table. Okay. So let's get into our main topic for today. And that is going to be, or I guess we do have this other news piece, but we really got into it. But you know what? Let's just touch this real quick. And I just want to talk about the trauma. Well, we talked about trauma, but I want to talk about like the specific idea that Trump's words were consistent with those of an abuser. And like, do you think, Stephanie, that is like overkill, right? Like to call his language and the gaslighting like consistent with like an abusive relationship?
No, I think that's very accurate because it is gaslighting. It's all out lying, right? He'd say, I didn't say that. And then a newscaster would say, here's a video of you saying that.
Of you literally saying
so, what's really interesting is I had a client at the time going through a pretty messy divorce where she came to terms with the fact that it was a very abusive relationship. And I used Trump as the example to get her to see how toxic this relationship was and get her to understand this is what an abusive relationship mirrors. This is what it's like. And I think, and this sounds a little narcissistic, I don't intend it to, but that was before everyone started to talk about Trump in the way that, this is, sort of emulating what an abusive relationship was. But, or maybe it's just people in the field, we knew that. And it was actually a way I found in this particular case, it was helpful as a metaphor for someone actually living in an abusive relationship to go, oh, yeah, that is what happens in my house. That's really not okay. Because they could recognize it on this larger scale. And so I happen to think it's a completely accurate description.
Interesting. That's so interesting. Yeah, I really love those insights because because I think that it's so easy to, because I don't spend my time in other people's heads in the same way that you do, right? Like it's easy to think that like, oh no, this is just me, or that maybe I'm blowing things out of perspective. I have been in my share of toxic relationships in my life, right? Of most of them. And though they've never been so that abusive, but the patterns of unhealthy behavior, I can see the reflection in how Trump is and how he basically how he treats his subordinates, for fuck's sake. I mean, right? He just he browbeats them, right? And this and it's like this complete loyalty. And if you don't, but that loyalty that he does not owe back at all, right? And it is like quintessential, I'm an abusive husband type feeling to it, or abusive father.
I have something to add to that, and that is the kind of language where one of the things that you hear from abusers a lot is like, "I'm the only one who could ever love you. Yeah. No one else will ever love you like I do." And that's kind of like when Trump said, "I alone can fix it." Mm-hmm. He essentially was, and then the other thing the abusers do is they isolate their victim from all other outside authority. Right. Mm-hmm. So you see that in Trump breaking down all the institutions. It's like if a court would rule against him, instead of saying, "Oh, well, I lost that one," he would go like, "Well, that court sucks," or "That court is biased," or "That's a Democrat judge," or whatever. And even to the point of his saying that he could kill someone on Fifth Avenue. Okay, a lot of abusers will tell their victims, if you go to the police, I'll kill you. And they try to get in between the victim and the law that could save them. And as a matter of fact, they will say things like, "If you ever try to leave, I will kill you, and I will kill the children." And we see these sorts of events happen all over the country all the time, where a man will kill his entire family and kill himself rather than submit to the rule of law or take accountability for what happened. And that is the entire essence of the Trump presidency, is that he, even to the point now, after he's not president anymore, the Screen Actors Guild tried to hold him accountable and kick him out of the guild. And he's like, "Who cares? Right? Mm-hmm. You're not the boss of me." And it's like, he's not accountable to anyone. And that is the abuser profile in spades.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's such a great analogy, and right, and you talked about how the abuser can hold the kids hostage essentially, right, and say like, "Look, I will hurt the kids. I won't pay for X, Y, and Z. I'll stop paying for that if you leave me, if you report me." And Trump held literally the United States hostage, right? He said, "Look, I am the king of the United States right now. I will tear this shit down if you don't do exactly what I'm doing." And he's held the entire Republican Party hostage. And he's still holding the entire Republican Party hostage as we speak. They cannot walk away because he has a gun to their fucking head. Or to the head of their constituents. He essentially is holding a gun to their constituents and saying, "Look, do what I say, or I'll turn these people away. I'll turn these people away like that, you know? And it's sick. It's sick, but that's such a great analogy. I'm glad we went back to that. I was gonna skip it. But I was like, nah, let's do it. I'm glad we did it. It was worth it. The payoff was there. The payoff was there. Okay. Now let's get into our discussion of diet culture, body image, and how that interacts with social justice. I want to first, though, just get a little bit of background on you, Stephanie. Why the hell should we take you seriously?
Fair point, because
I'm just fucking with you.
Well, no, but for listeners, I am a cisgendered, thin white woman. So that's a fair point, and I think that should be pointed out. So why should you take me seriously? I feel like this is my life's work. I'm really passionate about it. I myself have recovered from an eating disorder, so I have a lot of firsthand knowledge. And then as a professional in the eating disorder world, I will tell you it is so white, and that's a problem. Mm-hmm. And if we, all three of us, close our eyes and picture what we think of as a person with an eating disorder, I imagine both of you will give me an image of a white woman.
Yep. That's exactly
overly
right.
thin, thigh gap, the whole bit, you know?
Yeah. That's what I see.
Yes. And that's statistically so wrong, but that's the image we get because white women are, privileged and taken more seriously, and they're the thin ideal and all of that. So,
Interesting.
But to be honest, I think I should be taken seriously, but I don't want to take the voice away from other people who live in larger bodies or are, professionals and people of color. It's something I navigate all the time. Sort of, is this my, talk to have? Is this my place to speak? It's an interesting problem because the field is filled with mostly white people. And part of that is because it's very costly to get graduate degrees.
Right.
And the interest, is really high. So,
yeah.
So that in itself is a conflict I internally have. That's my answer.
I'll bet. And that said, I have known you a long time, and I remember when I was getting ready to go to college after my beginning recovering from drug addiction and all those problems, that I was going to Essex County College here in New Jersey, and you were going to Jersey City University, interestingly, because I am now in Jersey City University. I live in Jersey City. But just talk to us about like your trajectory from there to where you are now. Because I mean, you're an LCSW, highly trained. What were the steps that you had to take to get there, and why did you take the social route? And talk to us about why you took the social work route as opposed to a more like psychology route.
So, I went to a 4-year college. Yes, I went to Jersey City University. And then I studied criminal justice there. And I was working in Newark at a center for parolees. It was also when Cory Booker was running for mayor of Newark, and we helped out with that campaign. That was one of the projects we did, and it was awesome. And now I always think back upon that very fondly. I'm a big Cory Booker fan. But I had a supervisor who sort of pulled me aside and said, you're so good individually, and you really look at a person. And, at that time, my sort of role was to help people find employment. And so I did take that seriously. And I would say, Home Depot will hire people who have a record. Let's go to that Home Depot in this town because they have openings. And it was my supervisor who said, I think you should not get and I was considering getting a graduate degree in criminal justice. And she said, I think you are really good at, identifying with people and helping them out. And social work is probably the route you should go. And truthfully, it was just her opinion. And I said, that sounds good. I was really young. I didn't do much research.
I made a lot of decisions that way too back then. You're just like, all right, let's try that out. And then that was like a lifelong choice,
Yes. And I went in thinking I was going to do advocacy. That was my thought. And I had my first year internship also at a criminal justice center in Harlem. And I wasn't cut out for advocacy. It's to kind of circle back. I am the person, I just shut down. I get really frustrated. Don't you people see this is so wrong? This doesn't make any sense. And I didn't have the wherewithal emotionally to do it. I maybe now, as someone who's on the brink of being 40, I would have better resources. But so I switched to a clinical social work route, and I stayed the course. Mm-hmm. It's something I question myself all the time about, is why I didn't get a PhD. And my honest answer is I don't think at the time I thought I was capable of doing that. And I didn't have people around me who suggested it, because I had previously struggled in school, also because of my share of doing some amount of drugs. Mm-hmm. And I just didn't think I was capable of it. And it is something I regret. And I think about getting a PhD now. But I also think that's my ego, and it's probably unnecessary. Mm-hmm. That's my long-winded.
No, that's exactly what I was hoping for. I just wanted to talk to you about your journey, because I mean, I know it, but still we haven't talked about this in the context of us being almost 40, right? We've talked about this at age 25 and age 30, but that's different at being at age 40. And at this stage of our careers. And I can definitely identify with this idea of like, wow, could I have made some different choices in the past, right? Did I need to go to the school I went to and acquire loans? Or on the other hand, do I, or could I have gone more of an academic route, right? And like you, I had incredibly low self-esteem in terms of my ability to do well in school at all, because I spent most of my life doing terribly in school. Right. So I shot low, right? Because I didn't want to you know what I'm saying? Like I didn't, anyway, we've talked about this, but I think that's important. And I think that people can look at you and see what you've accomplished in your life and how far you've gotten and what you're doing today, and say like, oh, wow, right, that must have been easy, or look, this is how she always was, or whatever. But I think it's important for folks, and this is why I wanted to ask this question, because I get this about myself a lot too, right? I haven't where I am and where I went to school and what my occupation. It's easy, I think, for folks to think that was obvious or easy, or there isn't crippling self-doubt. You know what I mean? That is like a huge part of it. You know what I mean? Yeah. Look, so I also want to talk to you briefly about your business too, because you're not just a therapist. You are also a business owner. So, and you run a group practice. So what inspired you to do that? And is there do you have like a mission statement? Like, what do you want to try to accomplish? Or is it just something you like to do?
Well, one of the, I am definitely someone who sort of leaps and then says, oh shit, that's where I'm jumping to. So why I did it, truthfully, I was getting a lot of referrals and I couldn't take them all on. And I love supervising people through some of the postgraduate trainings I've done. I've become a supervisor at a psychoanalytic institute, and I love supervising people. And so I thought, let me sort of look into hiring someone to work under me that I would supervise and help them get their clinical hours postgraduate school. And I hired a fantastic person. I think that they are amazing. I really like supervising them. And they have a specialty that I don't. They work within the intersection of eating disorders in the queer community. So I learned from them as well. And they started getting so many referrals, and people were saying, oh, there's no one who really has this specialty of working, with in the queer community and eating disorders. And they sort of filled up. And then I, of course, know that there is, among people of color, they're severely underserved in the eating disorder community. And I thought, okay, maybe I could start a group practice, or maybe I could build this group practice to also work with people from marginalized communities that don't receive proper eating disorder treatment or can't find therapists who have some of the similar lived experience that they have. And so that's in a way my mission. I don't know if I have a full mission statement there, but I've become really passionate about that. And so my practice right now is pretty diverse, which I love. And we all get to learn from each other, which is cool too, even though I maybe am a more senior clinician by years and education. They have so much to teach me also, which is really awesome.
That's so great. That's so great because, I mean, it's so rare that we're able to do something that we're really passionate about, right? And something that it ticks the boxes and right. I get up. This is late capitalism. This is neoliberalism. This is a lot of things, and that means work is frequently brutal, and you get overworked, and it's not doing something that is very meaningful, right? That doesn't feel good to do, and it's really great that you're able to do that. I think a lot of the reasons why Sean and I do this show every week, right, is because it makes us feel that we are addressing the sort of issues that we think actually fucking matter, right? Social justice, and in particular, I think. Do you agree with that, Sean?
Well, it's certainly, it's a way for us to take our knowledge and what we've learned in our lives and through our course of study, which for me, mine didn't end with college. I mean, as a matter of fact, most of what I know today is from my own reading and study, particularly in the realm of evolutionary psychology and understanding, what we know about what science can tell us about being human is so much now of what I'm interested in, and being able to talk about that to an audience is great. And then it's also a little bit of therapy because, right? I mean, I have a therapist, but this is therapy because I get to talk to you, Christophe, and whoever our guests are about some of these things that are just really troubling. They're existential questions for us. And so, I just find it incredibly valuable that way. I would do it if nobody was listening.
Yeah, I agree.
Go ahead. No, I was going to say, wait, this is a great moment. This is one of my favorite distinctions. It's therapeutic, but it's not therapy. Which is a really important distinction.
Thank you.
There we go. Yeah. There we go. See, this is why we have pros on. And look, another thing that you mentioned that is learning from each other. I think that I know that I've learned a ton from you, Sean, over the years. And I think that we learn from each other on the show. I think that we learn from our guests, and the process of what I'm hearing is the process of self-betterment, I think, is part of this too, right? And that's what, you can do that through formal education, you can do that through informal education, and you can do that through having conversations like this. And that is sort of furthering knowledge, furthering our capacity to sort of empathize with people and connect with people. And I think that is sorely lacking, and it's really lacking on the right. Which is almost explicitly trying not to understand other people's experience, right? Because that's just not valuable to them in some way. So anyway, I think that's important. I think that's real important. Now,
one of the things that's happened here is that we've seen where what used to be just considered a matter of politics has morphed into questions of ethics. And so that's why where people used to be able to say, well, I don't really like to talk about politics and they would deflect in that way. Now it's become almost a sign of being antisocial. Like if you refuse to engage with politics these days, you're essentially turning a blind eye ethically to what's going on in the country. And so I think that's what's different, is that there's still people who are trying to go back to that old thing where we all can just kind of get along without discussing these things. And it's never going to happen. We have crossed the Rubicon. The Trump era broke that part of America. And now you have to take a stand. You have to take a side. And that's, I think, what's really different. And maybe that's a good thing.
I think it is a good thing. I mean, one thing, I mean, as I keep saying, Stephanie and I have known each other for years. I know Stephanie's family. And one thing that that has always been, like, Stephanie's dad, politics is part of the Roth family, right? Like that is, it's in the DNA. It's part of every single conversation. It is, right. It's like, you really can't go more than a few hours without somehow politics coming up. Right.
Yes.
And that political, what's the word I'm looking for? Competency, the ability to be able to talk, at least to some extent, to know generally what's going on, is something that is now hard to ignore, to your point, Sean, right? Like the Trump era broke that. I agree with you. Like, you can't not think about it. I mean,
it's literacy. It's literacy.
That's the word I was looking for. Literacy I was looking for. That's the word I was looking for.
I have not in my family, my partner's family, some family members who refuse to talk about politics, and it's shocking every time, and it's infuriating. Right. We went over to their house the day after RBG died, and no one mentioned it. And I still can't even formulate how it felt. I'm like, these people live under a rock. Right. Are they, but what it does, to kind of also circle back, right, is it makes me feel unsafe around them, because I think if you're not talking about politics, you're sort of on the other side, let's say. And that would be, that's in my opinion, the only reason not to talk about politics is because you're ashamed or hiding your view. And people,
such a good point.
Yeah, it's the old Elie Wiesel quote about, silence neutrality favors the oppressor. And
that's right.
It also goes along with a Rush song, which is called Free Will. And in that song, there is the lyric, if you choose not to decide, you still have made a choice.
Yep, that's right.
And these people are choosing not to decide. And so they're casting their lot in with the oppressor. It's just open and shut. There's no exceptions.
That's exactly right. And
I agree.
And you can't, oppressors cannot oppress without that group of people who are willing to turn a blind eye, right? Like that is like that big chunk in the middle that are just willing, like, you know what? I just don't want to think about it. I just want to think about my kids or my job or whatever else, all of which are important things for sure. But the unwillingness to confront the ugly truth of what's going on is exactly what allows oppressors to oppress. So anyway, let's get into diet culture very specifically. Anyone who follows you, who knows you, Stephanie, or follows you on Instagram knows that you're no fan of diets or diet culture. So let's talk about, what do you mean by diet culture and what's your beef with it?
So diet culture, there's Christy Harrison, who wrote a book called Anti-Diet, really is the person who defines this. And I wish I could come up with the quote at the moment, but it will probably come to me as we talk. Diet culture so the diet industry is a $70 billion industry. And diets were created by white men. If you look at all of the historic diets, and BMI was created by a white man who wasn't even researching bodies. So what diet culture is the culture that basically steals us of our, it's not dissimilar from religion, right? That makes you think you're doing something right or wrong. And it idealizes thinness, and it idealizes whiteness. And diet culture is everywhere, right? So but it is the idea that really, if you're not thin, you're doing something wrong. And it's hard to talk about diet culture without also talking about fat phobia, because the two are so intertwined and connected. And so again, it just puts generally thin white women, but thinness on a pedestal, and really stigmatizes anyone who is not that.
That's really, really interesting. And I did not know that about the BMI index and about the basically the invention of diet. But of course, that's the answer to that question. Of fucking course it is. And Sean, I wonder, Sean, do you know anything? You are the resident evolutionary psychology expert. What do you think about fat phobia and evolutionary psychology? Is there an evolutionary basis for why people tend to hate, resistant to that?
It's actually the opposite, because if you look throughout history, I mean, we humans have dealt with famine. Famine has been the major enemy of humanity for most of human history. It's only been the last few thousand years that we've got rid of famine, and it's still not gone. A lot of places in the world, there are still people dealing with famines. And famine is, of course, a weapon of war. So what that means is that from an evolutionary standpoint, people who had a few extra pounds had an advantage.
Right.
Okay. So you're storing calories. That's the whole reason we get fat, because what you don't consume, what your body doesn't consume, it turns into fat cells, which are rich with energy. They can be then later broken down back into glucose that your body can use. So you have the situation where having a few extra pounds is a huge advantage. People would not survive famines if you were as thin as what the ideal is today. So, and what the other thing I want to say about the beauty ideal is it was more about a ratio than about a specific weight. So someone could be considered very beautiful if they had the bust to hips to waist ratio, even if they were heavy. So, and I think the same is true today. I think you see a lot of the body shaming that goes on has to do mainly with women who have fat stomachs. And who don't have, because if they're busty and they got a big ass and a thin waist, even if they weigh, 200 pounds, it's okay. And so you see that, you see a lot of that in, Baby Got Back, right? It's not as open and shut as just thin versus fat. There's a whole bunch of other dynamics that goes along with that. And it's also cultural.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. But what's interesting is that also the thin ideal really, because Sean, what you're saying is true, right? And if we look back in history, there was a time where being more curvy and fuller bodied was really what was attractive. But if you look at when Twiggy and things like that came out, it was also right after women got the right to vote. And so, it's hard to have the knowledge of history and say, oh, there's something, once you start to realize where this all came from, it's oppressive. It's really an oppressive system. And it is a way to keep women, occupied and focused on something other than, being successful or doing whatever.
Doing what men do.
Right. Right.
Yeah. And that's really interesting. I never made that connection. Man, I'm so glad we're having this conversation because I didn't make that connection directly, but certainly not between voting and body image, but even just the social, the patriarchy element of this, right? I mean, it's funny. I'll be. I hope Lindsay doesn't mind, but I'm the laundry guy at the house, right? So like I'm always doing laundry. My life is laundry, right? I mean, and look, I know I don't have any kids. Like you're looking at me right now. You're like, you think your life is fucking laundry?
Right.
But look, so laundry's on my mind all the time. So I'm always like going through, look through underwear. I'm like, wait, Lindsay, this is your underwear, and I'm like, this is what, and like, or women's shoes. And I'm like, wait, these are your shoes? What? And Lindsay's pretty practical, right? She doesn't buy into all the bullshit, but still sometimes we'll put on a pair of shoes and I'm like, what, you're going to wear those all day? And the point is like all of these systems, right? Or these like sort of structures placed on women to sort of to keep, like you say, keep them occupied, but also it seems to me like always running after a beauty standard that men control, right? It is like, and then that and abortion, right? Anti-abortion, all this stuff is like, let's see how we can control women. And I'm sure the backlash, just like when Black people get votes, get move forward, the white lash is like hardcore, right? Trumpism was a white lash backlash to Obama. And I imagine, like you said, after women get the right to vote, suffrage, all of a sudden you probably see a lot of this stuff started getting piled on.
Yes. And the other thing, you can't really talk about diet culture without talking about white supremacy, right? Because, and there's a wonderful book called Fearing the Black Body by Dr. Sabrina Strings. That actually, Sean, if you like reading about this stuff, it sounds like this would be up your alley because it's really an academic read, but it's fantastic. But it also talks a lot about how thinness began to distinguish, right, like white women from Black women, and how, we made this comment earlier about the cultural sort of the way that culture plays into this too. And I always think about this. If you are a white person who is wealthy and you give your kid juice, you're doing something great, and that's healthy and that's wonderful, and you made juice. But if you are a poor Black woman giving your kid juice, then you're, ruining their lives, and they're going to be fat, and that's so high in sugar. And
Right.
but even I bet, as I told this story, both of you probably pictured like celery juice from a juicer, and then
Right.
I don't know,
Well, it
high
could be-
C or whatever it is. I don't know.
Yeah.
But
Those are the images. It's so man. It's like I appreciate you calling it out, right? Because these are images that I don't even think about them consciously, but in retrospect, as you say that, I'm like, that's absolutely what came up in my mind,
Well,
and it just goes to show how this stuff is internalized, right?
When you think about what a juicer costs and what it costs to buy fresh vegetables and fruits all the time, and how there are food deserts in certain parts where it's not even available.
Right.
If you're thinking about somebody who's making juice or smoothies, it's a freaking white wealthy neighborhood, and
100%.
So,
true.
and the people of color in the food deserts are feeding their kids sodas, not juice.
Right. Or the juice that's like high C, like you said, juice.
Junk juice.
Junk juice. Yeah. But and it becomes a cultural problem, right? And is that right? And then I say this all the time, is that it shocks me that conservatives, I think it's bad faith or lack of reasoning skills, but are shocked when people behave and grow up to be exactly in like the environment in which they grew up in, right? Like, which is like, how is that shocking to you? Like, why are you surprised that someone who grew up eating fast food, not being in a shitty education system where perhaps they didn't even have heat in their fucking classroom. They didn't even have fucking heat in their classroom.
Or books, right? By the way.
Or books, let alone multimedia, anything, right? And going to eating McDonald's, and then why would you expect that person to then not do the same thing with their kids? Like, sure, someone might not do that, and that's rare though, right? I am a lot like my parents, and I suspect that all of us are a lot like the environment in which we grew up in. It's not surprising. And how do you break that cycle? Raising people up, right? You raise people up, minimum wage, all the things that we all know are like that we can point to that work. Yeah. Anyway, rant over, I guess. Let's move on. And I want to specifically ask you, what's Noom? I get Noom commercials every fucking day.
First of all, what the fuck is Noom? I've seen those commercials. What is it?
Oh, you have seen the commercial, Sean? Or not?
I've seen them, but I don't have any fucking idea what it is. Is it a product? Is it a system? What the fuck is it?
So Noom is in some ways a really great example of how pervasive diet culture is, because as people are recognizing diet culture, and as that's a term, in everyone's sort of vernacular at the moment, obviously these industry people come and sort of co-opt what they think is moving away from that. And so Noom is the example. And Noom is the example that everyone in this anti-diet community uses, because it pretends it's not a diet. So it'll say, I feel so good. I feel so energized. But really the goal of Noom is to lose weight. And Noom served an ad to me recently where they had a ice cream with, I think, like peanut butter on it or something. And then they said, well, you don't have to eat this. You can have freedom to eat. And then the next image was like chia seeds and a banana with maybe like a dollop of yogurt.
Right.
And I was like, those two are not the same thing. If you're not the ice cream, eat the fucking ice cream, first of all. But don't try and fool me to say that I'll be as satisfied if I want ice cream eating chia seeds. I won't. No one will.
Literally nobody will.
Right. But that's Noom. But they sort of do it under this guise of it's not a diet, it's a lifestyle. It's so freeing. You can eat whatever you want within these, parameters, which again, that's diet culture. If you're telling me I then have to think about the fact that I want ice cream and then spend all of this time finding a substitution that will never satisfy me, I've now spent so much time getting to fucking chia seeds. And then by the end of the night, I still want the ice cream also. That's also what the research shows.
Right. It's not like the craving goes away. Right.
Right.
It's really interesting because what it is it's something for nothing. It's like you can get this result while giving up nothing, but it's really a lie. And a lot of that, it's a little bit of a diversion here, but the whole issue with low-fat foods, where they essentially replaced the fat in foods with sugar, and it ended up actually creating a bigger obesity crisis.
Right,
there's a book that's called Sugar, Salt, Fat, and it talks about the triangle between those three and how that has interacted with the diet industry and everything else like that. And I don't know if you know about that book or if you have anything.
I've heard of that book, but I can't say that I've read it. I don't know that
I haven't read it either. I've heard about it, but
it speaks to that too, because all of these diets, the research shows this over and over again, which is also amazing that people still diet and still, it's such a successful industry. But, I think it's something like 85% of people regain the weight they lost in a diet within a year, and then something like 90% within like 5 years, or those are not the exact statistics, but the weight loss is not sustainable when it happens in the form of diet culture, right? Because to use this example, if someone wants ice cream, it's not sustainable to eat chia seeds every day. You're going to want the ice cream, and this is where binging and overeating kind of happen. But yeah, so the low fat thing also left people feeling greatly unsatisfied because we need fat to feel satiated. So
I wonder, as I'm listening, I am thinking about eating disorders, and I'm thinking about addiction, and I'm thinking about how, right, diet culture informs those problems, right? Because now, hear me out. So it seems to me that if this is the thing we talk about in terms of religion all the time, that religion is like as if there's this magic ledger out there somewhere, right? And that you do good things, and the good ledger goes up, and you do bad things, and the bad or the bad ledger goes up, and it's like some sort of cosmic thing. And like it seems like dieting is very simple, and although it might actually be a real ledger that you're dealing with, right? But the bottom line is that you're supposed to feel guilt. It's a guilt-based system, right? The idea is like, that's the entire fucking shebang. And so now what do you do when you feel guilty about yourself? You punish yourself, right? Is that how you get to eating disorder? I mean, is that how because that's certainly how addiction can work, like real, like chemical addiction can work. How do you think about that?
So similar to addiction in a lot of ways, there is a genetic component to eating disorders, which doesn't mean that everyone who has those genetics will get an eating disorder, but it also means that it's not as simple as sort of the description that you just gave. But that is one route to eating this, to, sort of a diagnostic eating disorder. But because also if you think about it, it does create this right or wrong, good or bad, even in the way we talk about food. Like it was great, Sean, you said junk juice, right? So if I'm eating junk juice, I then have to, what's the association I'm telling myself? I shouldn't have this junk. Am I bad for eating it? There's something better I could be eating. And again, this gets really complicated when you don't have access financially or otherwise to those quote unquote better foods. But specifically with eating disorders, it does often start a lot with wanting to be healthy. And then that creates its own problem because people identify health as thinness, which is always sort of, they say, I want to be healthy, but what they mean is I want to be thin.
Right.
But in our culture, and this is where diet culture is so pervasive, that when people say healthy, we all think, we might not consciously think thin, but that's what we picture.
Definitely.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And there's a whole thing where a lot of women, especially if they have a borderline BMI, they'll go to the doctor for a checkup. The doctor will tell them you need to lose weight.
Oh, yeah.
Like hardcore, like you're putting your heart at risk. You're doing this, you're doing that, and some women who I've talked to who've gone through that, like they're fine. They don't need they're going to be fine. There are plenty. They're in a normal size range for Americans. And now I know that America is generally obese. Compared to a lot of other countries that have more traditional diets. But at the same point, it's not to the level where a doctor should be telling a woman that she's super unhealthy when she's, a few pounds over.
But even if it is to that level, if you lead with that, I often always say like, that fat phobia is the last ism that's sort of publicly allowed, right? Like you really don't get the same treatment. I'm working with someone who hurt their knee in a very specific way, and they were terrified to go to the doctor because they thought the doctor is going to tell me I need to lose weight. However, my knee has been perfectly fine for years. I did this very specific thing. I felt it, it got injured. And, we worked hard to find a doctor who was what's called health at every size informed, so that he or she could look at the patient and go, oh, it's your knee, not that you're fat. Because that's what happens. That's what you're describing, Sean, too, is it becomes that you don't get good health care. You get prescribed a diet. Right. And they don't look further than that. Right.
It just goes to show how pervasive this is within even the medical community, like in our culture, in our society, and of course, Black women with bigger bodies, or women with bigger bodies in general, are going to be. It's just like, what a almost like emotional prison to be in, right? Like,
it's so funny because when I was younger, this is probably 25 years ago or whatever, and I read an article, and it was a guy talking about his wife who was, I don't know what she weighed, but she was fairly a lot heavier than what would be considered normal or traditionally attractive. And he was writing this article, and he said, I love my wife. I love the way she looks. I love her body. And I'm not going to apologize for that. And I was like, it was the first time like something switched on in my head, because remember, I grew up in the 70s and 80s where people used to drive around with no fat chicks bumper stickers on their cars. And the idea of dating a fat woman was like shame, and it was mocked even in television shows. Like, definitely, you would see a guy and there were names for it. Chubby chaser, there's all these names and shaming for men who actually were attracted to heavier women. And it's like a light went on for me then. And another light went on maybe, within the last 10 or 15 years, just really thinking about and being able to, for the first time, be able to actually appreciate and literally appreciate beautiful, curvy, larger women, and just going, oh my God, like when I was a kid, when I was 20, I never would have even considered someone like that to be beautiful. And I think it's just a brainwashing that has occurred, and I had to deprogram myself from that.
And we still do.
Go ahead.
Sorry, because BMI, by the way, is bullshit. It wasn't ever a measure that was supposed to be a measure of bodies. It was studied and created on white men. And in 1998, the National Health Organization just decided they were going to change all the numbers overnight. And so one day, you were in a healthy BMI, and then you woke up the next morning, the whole system changed, and you became at an unhealthy BMI. And that's literally what happened. There's studies about this. It's written up. And so you were overweight one day, and then the next day you woke up and you were obese. So even just looking at BMI, it is bullshit. It's not a measure of anything. And there is also some research that shows a higher level of BMIs are protective measures. You fare better, and you live longer. But as you're saying, it's just that it was a image thing, Sean. You're right. And we're all programmed, though, to think about BMI as a measure of something, but it's really a measure of nothing. It's an arbitrary number.
Well, and also the advertising industry, and we've really seen a lot of progress in the last 5 to 10 years. I don't know who the first to really do it was. Maybe the Dove commercials, or there were some other.
Dove was.
Yeah, there's been a change where now all of a sudden you're not seeing, it's not size 0, size 2 anymore. That you're seeing a lot of diversity in body size, which is just so welcome as far as I'm concerned.
That is so true, Sean. And I just wanted to hit on that because, man, that just hit home for me. And what you said, I just hadn't thought of it. How in the past, you're absolutely right. I mean, the idea of dating an overweight woman over quote unquote, see, there I go, right?
It's just how people thought of it.
It's how people thought of it, right? And it's like, and what really hit me is when you said recently, what you just said toward the end there was that, like, within those last several years, as I have thought about this and really tried to wrap my mind around this about fat phobia and the last ism, really, right? And think about it like, holy shit, like, wait, I'm allowed, like, these women are attractive too, right? Like you said, right? I'm just baffled, and like, I gotta feel like I just got caught with my pants down a little bit here, because I'm like, holy shit, you're absolutely right. That's exactly how I thought about it growing up. A
lot of them they're not just acceptable. They're really beautiful.
Beautiful women, absolutely beautiful women.
But even the way we're talking about it, right? Even the way you both are talking about it, it's so interesting, because you're still making a distinction between big women and other women.
You're right.
Which is really
absolutely right.
Well, you know what it is? Okay, and that's
You're
tough.
So right.
That's tough, because there's also been a backlash about discrimination against thin women, right? Because with all of this size size acceptance, though, there's been a lot of thin women to go, hey, what about us? Right? It's kind of like, but my point is, and your point is well taken, Stephanie, that we are still identifying a person by their body type.
Yep. Exactly.
Right. And Athleta, the brand, just rolled out a competency that they mandated for all their employees. Because while there is size diversity in advertising, there's still really a lacking of size diversity in clothing that people want to wear. And Athleta just rolled out a training where, they taught people, their employees, to not say things such as, that looks so flattering on you. Because again, when we say flattering, we mean thin.
Right.
And, so they're the first, at least that I've heard of, and that, I'm very well deep in this sort of culture of anti-diet.
Sure.
But it's the first that I know of where, you have to teach your employees not to make thinness the reason to buy clothes. Does it look good? Right. The stripes make you look thin. Oh, that makes your belly look whatever.
Right.
And it's such a pervasive problem.
And you know what? As I'm thinking here, you talked about advertising, and one thing that I've noticed, and I'm sure I've talked to you about this, Stephanie, in the past, and I know I talk to Lindsay about it all the time, and that is, I never used to see interracial couples or in advertising ever, right? And now it's like I see it all the time, and I'm heartened by that, but I'm also not heartened by the fact that all the kids are these mixed kids, and because like and it's like it's great that there's mixed kids, but like, why not just have black kids, right? Like, because so it's definitely an improvement. It's definitely a step in the right direction, but like you're saying, it sounds like it's still like, well, they're cute because they have that hair, that like fluffy hair, and their skin is that perfect, beautiful skin tone. It's not right. Like, as if there's something not as good as just being a dark skinned black person. Right. You know what I'm saying? And like, so steps in the right direction for sure, but still problem. And relatedly, I'd like to talk specifically, and we've talked about this a lot, and we don't have to go crazy with it, but we've talking about specifically about how this impacts Black people and Black women, and Black women in particular. I think probably are really heavy hit by this. I think I don't know if it's necessarily a diet or a cultural thing, or a combination of those things, or just a natural way that Black bodies are. But I think that we, like you keep saying, we can't talk about diet culture without talking about racism and white supremacy. And maybe we should talk a little bit more about that if we haven't said it all already.
Well, we've never said it all, I think.
Ain't that the truth? Ain't that the truth? I just can't imagine. I mean, I can imagine. I know what it's like to be a Black guy and be in, for example, I remember in high school and having a friend of mine say, "Oh, I'm just not attracted to Black people." Right? Like, and knowing that the girls that I went to high school with are thinking the same thing. So I can only imagine what it must be as a Black woman to say, like, I'm curvy, I am, I've got hips, I've got, this is my body, and the entire culture says that there's something wrong with me.
A great example of this is, Lizzo is amazing, and everyone loves Lizzo. And recently on her Instagram, she did, I think, a 10-day, maybe it was a 5-day, whatever, cleanse. And the whole anti-diet world blew up. They were furious. And then a few Black women and other women of color said, Lizzo didn't come out here to be your spokesperson. What are you looking to her for? She is just a person existing in her life. Whether she does a cleanse or not doesn't have any effect on you. But people were, it's cancel culture, right? People were canceling her. People are right, but just because, and Lizzo is amazing. She's very talented, but just because she's beautiful, right? But because of that, people have made her the spokesperson for anti-diet, for this whole culture. And she's not, but, and I think the world is always ready to cancel a Black woman for doing things. So she goes online, does a, cleanse, and everyone's ready to cancel her, even though she didn't sign up. She just signed up to be an artist who happens to live in a bigger body. She didn't come out here to be the body positive spokesperson of everyone, particularly white women.
I was just thinking about that, and I was realizing that it's still another form of association, right? You're taking somebody who has a larger body and you're now associating them with anti-diet, but it's still diet. You're still associating. It's still why are we talking about this? Because her body is large, right?
Right. You're still othering them. Right.
It's still othering. That's such a great point. Yeah. You're still othering. It's as if, right. I always joke about this with Lindsay. It's like, I am really unhappy that I don't have more, queer people in my life. And I'm always like, I miss that about being in law school, particularly, right? Because school in general is great like that, because it pulls together a large, like all disparate types of people, and you just meet all kinds of different people and you're forced to interact with them. And it's great like that. Work can be like that, but it's just not the same as school. It's not, work is work, and it's professional, and there's boundaries, everything. Anyway, point is, and I'm always like, but then I'm like, oh man, I would love to have a LGBTQ friend. And it's like, wow, how awful is that? So I'm like othering them, but like, oh, come be my token LGBTQ friend. Like, and of course I don't really think that. I would never actually do that on those grounds, but it reminds me of similar to what you guys are talking about here, which is like, look, just let the person be an LGBTQ person. Let her just be her, right? Anyway, interesting stuff. So yeah, and this is a question I want to ask, and we already talked about it, but I'm just going to read the question because I thought I was really, really happy about the question, and I just want to read it, even though we already answered it. And that is, it's taken as given at the Radical Secular that every element of American identity, history, and culture necessarily interacts with America's unresolved legacy of chattel slavery. Tell us, Stephanie, how does that legacy impact diet culture? And we have talked about that a little bit already.
We have, and again, this is all in Dr. Sabrina String's books, and she talks about this a lot, right? Because picture what a woman who was a slave looks like.
I got it.
Right, they're bigger bodied.
Yep. Aunt Jemima, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Big, right. It's amazing. You're so right. You're so fucking right.
So how do you distinguish yourself from them? You become thin, and you have the means and the access to become thin, to distinguish yourself by. And that's one of the ways also diet culture started, right? Is it became a class issue. If you were thinner, you were sort of known to be, and again, this changed because originally it was if you were bigger, you were known to be of a higher class because you had more access to food, but somewhere along the way that changed. And so if you think about, that was one of the ways, and it's also a way to keep people down, right? To keep, that sort of system. If you're just not as good, you're not seen as deserving if you live in a bigger body. And again, if we all close our eyes and picture what a slave woman looked like, a woman who was enslaved looked like, they lived in bigger bodies. So it was sort of, you knew where they stood in the culture based on their body.
Interesting. See, I'm glad I read the question. This is the second time this happened. I thought maybe we'll skip it. But I was like, no. The payoff was there. I
will also say this, because the distinction here is important too. This isn't necessarily about slavery, but it is about racism. Wellness and diet culture co-ops food, and we make this, right? Like, this is a good food. This is but again, if you went and you saw people eating rice and beans,
right,
you would have something to say about that, and you would say, "Oh, that's so many carbs," or whatever you want to say. But then somehow diet culture can make, But if you're vegetarian and you're white and you eat beans, no one questions that.
So true.
Right.
Wow.
Absolutely.
So it goes deep.
It goes deep. The shit is deep.
Well, and there's a difference there between, for example, refried beans that are made with a lot of lard, which tend to be eaten not by white people, versus beans that you cooked yourself, like black beans, that have less calories per, right? There's just so many cultural traditions that play into this.
But again, it's appropriation, right? Because we will take beans now and make them healthy. Even though beans aren't really, that culturally, like, as you're saying, they're a cultural food. And then if we take them and make them healthy, it's a way that we distinguish that too.
Yeah. Now, we're running out of time here. And I know, Stephanie, your time is limited. And I want to round this conversation out with a discussion that is perhaps a little narcissistically. I want to talk about this book called Atomic Habits. And let me just read really quickly here. I read a book last year called Atomic Habits. The book's thesis is that our goals are generally only as achievable and sustainable as our habits are productive. In other words, if we want to achieve a particular goal, we need to make the activities that will allow us to reach that goal part of our day-to-day habits. That analysis rings quite true and quite useful in my experience. When I reflect critically on my past successes in life, as grand as, say, completing law school, or as personally gratifying and simple as learning to play a guitar or completing an essay, I usually can also identify the positive habits that led me to achieve those goals. But the Atomic Habits approach can also lead to self-defeating outcomes that seem to mirror many of the problems we've identified with diet culture. As I've matured, I've had to learn that even though I didn't meditate today, or I didn't work out, or I didn't eat healthy today, I didn't write today, doesn't mean that I fucked up. I've had to balance that self-acceptance with the need to format my behavior to achieve goals that are important to me. How do you think about that, Stephanie? And what does a healthy relationship with exercise and diet and body image look like in your view?
One of the main taglines that people say is, if we think more about what our body does and not what it looks like, that's really the definition of a healthy body image, right? Because our bodies do so much for us, but if we are focused on what they look like, that's a losing battle. And we become consumed with that because we are also taught that we can change that. And, a lot of things we cannot change. So I think to quickly say that would be a healthy body image, thinking, being respectful of your body, what it can do, not what it looks like. And similarly,
that's useful. That's helpful.
I'm super passionate about the relationship to exercise. Because diet culture definitely stole that. And an unpopular opinion that I have is that I think anti-diet culture also sort of goes the other extreme. But a healthy relationship with exercise is one in which you find enjoyment, and it isn't done to change your body, but it's done to add to your life, right? All the research shows exercise is great for depression, anxiety, concentration, bone health, right? Hormonal health, we could go on and on, brain health. But if you wake up and you feel as though, I need to work out because I ate too much food, or I need to work out because I don't like the way my arms look, you've created a negative association. And one that is sort of not a positive. And it's harder to maintain that. It becomes obsessive, but also it takes away from the benefits of exercise in itself that one can derive pleasure from. And again, if it's focused on what it can do for you holistically, but not at all what it can do for how your body looks.
Right. I have to admit that one of the things that I struggle with that. The body image issue is a male issue too, obviously,
yes.
but and more so that men are being willing to talk about that, I think, in a way that they weren't socialized to do in the past. But that's something that I definitely struggle with, right? I'm a relatively thin guy, but still, you know, I look at myself in the mirror and I say to myself, "Oh, I wish I didn't see that, or I didn't see that." And generally, I'm not like I have been in the past. I'm much more reasonable, but still, I still feel that pang of, man, I should have done that, or I should have done this. And that's what I was getting at with the atomic habits question, is like, I find that there's a balance to be struck between wanting to achieve something. If I want to achieve a goal, and for my own personal goal, like write an essay or write a book, like I only achieve that if I make it, basically I create a positive habit structure that I do and I write every day. And if I do, but at the same time, there's that balance between, I don't want to be beating myself up. I spent so many years of my life feeling like shit about myself because I wasn't adhering to. Sean and I grew up in as you know, an incredibly rigid ethical and moral system. And so I don't want to fall into this place where I'm like beating myself up all the time. So it's like this balance to be struck there. It sounds like, you know, the holistic way of looking at exercise might be a good analogy here for the broader question of how to balance positive habits and outcomes with healthy psychology.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, I had something to add about this, and I think that one of the issues, it's just like at the beginning of the show when I was talking about how having a little bit of extra weight was an advantage in a famine situation. Mm-hmm. Okay, now we're in a situation where industrialization has made exercise optional. And that has led to this problem of exercise becoming a matter of self-discipline, when for most of human history, it was a matter of necessity. Right. You had to go to the well to get water. You had to be out in the fields. You had to be doing this and that. You had to be working an industrial job where you're moving around all day. There's no issue with the male body as long as the male is working 12 hours a day.
Right.
You're just not going to get it. You're not going to get into a sedentary lifestyle where you have to worry about disciplining yourself to exercise. And so this is a new problem of industrialization. It's also a first world problem because there's much more manual labor that takes place in poorer countries than there is here.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just, class is just such a huge part of this, right? And that is, I think, the theme that runs through this entire show, is that class is such a huge factor because, like you talked about access, Stephanie, right? And we talked about food deserts. We talked about lack of resources, and it ends up being a critical factor here, and just being white. And just having that also happen to be the ideal, right? To be a thin white woman or a thinner white guy or a built white guy or whatever, it ends up being a serious factor. So anyway, look, I know, Stephanie, I know you have to go, and I'm so happy that you were here with us. It was just a lot of fucking fun and super insightful. And thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. This was an awesome conversation. I'm glad
I enjoyed it, and it was great to meet you and talk with you, Stephanie.
You too.
Well, I had a lot of fun talking to Stephanie. Sean, does anything stick out to you about our conversation?
Well, all I can say is that I, having not ever met Stephanie before, I was just thoroughly impressed with how clear her answers were on all of these topics and how much thought she's obviously put into them. And I really enjoyed the conversation. Nothing in particular, but everything in general. Totally.
It was an absolute pleasure for me. I think that Stephanie is a really impressive person. She's been an incredibly close friend, as you and I have talked about, for a long, long time. And she just knows her shit. She knows her shit up and down, inside and out, and it shows. And she's good at talking. And it was really great to have the three of us on here, just having a really fun, interesting, but also insightful conversation.
Definitely.
Yeah. Well, Anyway, here we are at the end of the show again. I want to remind you, everyone out there, to make sure to subscribe to this podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Be sure to give us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts and write us a review. And tell your friends and family about the show, because word of mouth really does matter. So, look, thank you so much for being here. And remember that wherever you are, you can be radically secular.